All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Amy Dean. Amy is a labor activist, the author of the book A New Deal, How Regional Activism Will Reshape the American Labor Movement, and a fellow at the Century Foundation, all of which and more you can find at her website, abdventures.com. You can also find her on Twitter at Amy B. Dean. Amy, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure.
All right, so Amy, you recently had a really great piece up at Truth Out on the plight of restaurant workers, the plight of trying to organize restaurant workers, restaurant worker justice. Why don't you just tell us all about the piece?
Well, I think one of the goals of the piece was to highlight the ways in which new forms of employee organizations are beginning to take root. Increasingly, it's been difficult for the labor movement to organize workers that move from job to job, workers who don't see themselves employed at the same place for a long time or don't simply see themselves working in a particular industry as a career. And I think what the point was to this article was to highlight the innovative ways in which new social entrepreneurs are building organizations to create some of the same solidarity that in the past traditional unions created. And in these instances, both in the case of the Restaurant Opportunity Center, organizations like the National Workers Domestic Alliance, are examples of how working people are coming together to increase their conditions of work, to increase the security of employment, and to increase pay and benefits in spite of all the traditional challenges that temporary non-standard employees incur.
And really, the work that the restaurant opportunity centers are trying to do are unbelievably necessary, because I don't think people even really think that much about what people in the service industry actually go through and how little they get paid and how horrible their work conditions can actually be.
If you think about the restaurant and food service industry, it's one of the largest employers in the country. I think why people don't often recognize that is because the ownership is divided across many, many different employers. But increasingly, you see huge corporations. I know one of the focuses for the Restaurant Opportunity Center's campaign was Mario Battaglio, who's a major food personality. So increasingly, the industry, while employing lots of different people across lots of different employers, is becoming concentrated in terms of capital and the number of people who are employed. And in many of these jobs, again, one of the fastest growing occupations in the country, people are paid well below the poverty line. They receive very few benefits, if at all, and their employment is tenuous because the demand for labor outstrips in many ways the supply. And so in many cases, employers don't feel they need to make a commitment to people, that there's just somebody else around the corner. So I think one of the important things about looking at restaurant and food employees, again, is that an increasing number of people are trying to sustain themselves and their families based on employment that in the past people tend to characterize as young people are taking these jobs, or artists, or actors who are just really looking to supplement their income, whereas the truth is more and more people are trying to support families and create living wage jobs and a middle-class standard for themselves and their children.
No, that's absolutely correct. And the fact is that with the decline of manufacturing in this country, with the decline of decent middle class jobs, so many of the only real jobs, a good percentage of the jobs that are coming back in our supposed new economy are service industry jobs. And the fact of the matter is, you have restaurant workers who do not get paid sick days. They don't get really vacation. So if they don't come into work, they don't get paid. And they also have the thing, if they're sick, they might get fired for not actually showing up just because they're actually sick.
Well, I think the important point that you raise that I don't know that enough people really understand, which is the majority of job employment in this country is taking place in the service sector. And if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can go up to their site and see the fact that 10 of the fastest 20 growing occupations in this country pay less than a living wage. So when we talk about employers like Walmart, We talk about employers like the restaurant industry. We talk about employers who employ domestic workers. We talk about folks who are working janitorial jobs or security jobs. That is the new American workforce. And what's important about that point is that too often people think that the new jobs in this country are being created in high tech and information technology and all sorts of high wage paying jobs. And the truth is the growth in job creation in this country is low wage, low paid, no benefits. It's also primarily in the service sector. And so the need to pay attention to these much more public campaigns that are starting to take place, like for Walmart workers, like for domestic workers, like for restaurant employees, is that is the new norm. That is the new working class in this country. And it is in all of our interests to ensure that when the majority of people are working, that they're able to move into the middle class. Whether you care about that as a bleeding heart liberal, as a labor activist, or simply somebody that cares about the social fabric of this country, we can't afford to have a healthy democracy and have increasing numbers of people working and poor.
I'm talking to Amy Dean, labor activist and author. Yeah, what kills me so much about the restaurant worker, idea and the fact that they do not get sick leave, it's like, just the logic of that just kills me. It's like, as consumers, do you really want your food served by someone who is ill? Do you really want someone making your food who is like, just coughing constantly? That is, that their nose is running. That they're sick with the flu. That's who you want serving you your food. Just the logic of that, I can't possibly even get my head around that.
Well, I think you point to a really important point, which is that there are legions of people in our country who are working in jobs where there is a public interest. Whether we're talking about restaurant employees who come to work sick and potentially spread all sorts of different kinds of germs, or whether we're talking about healthcare workers and firefighters and teachers who have 3-hour commutes to get to and from their job because they can't afford to live in the same place that they work. Increasingly, it's a great point that you raise, which is we have people serving the public good in this country that aren't able to take care of themselves because of conditions of employment. And that is a bigger public health issue. And that's why the immigration debate in this country becomes so important. We can't have increasing numbers of people working who aren't eligible for health care, who aren't eligible for the same kind of benefits for people that have documentation. And to have a growing number of people working in this country that don't have legal status and don't have the right to benefit from public services and don't have the right to stand up and push for better conditions at work really is something that's in the broader public interest. And so to your point, we can't have it both ways. We can't say that we're going to try to get as much as we can from people for as little as we can and expect to be a healthy country, whether it's people, who are sick serving our food, or it's healthcare workers who can't afford their own health insurance, or it's firefighters who are traveling 3 or 4 hours to get to and from their jobs because housing is too expensive. We have a crisis in this country. And the crisis is we have cut off the pathway to being part of America's middle class. And so until we're willing to address the rights of employees to increase their conditions at work, until we're really willing to talk about rebuilding a social safety net in this country, the two pillars of America's last New Deal, collective bargaining and a strong social safety net. In the absence of rebuilding that and retooling it for the way in which we work today and the kind of economy that we have today versus the way we used to work in the past is foundational to being able to build not just benefits or rights for working people, but to rebuild the public interest and to protect the public interest of this country.